Hello everyone and welcome to an exciting series of tutorials on filmmaking and cinematography. My name is George Ojadis and I'm the Content Development Director at Stocksy United. Today and for the next 10 days, we're going to be shooting a short film here in beautiful Atlanta, Georgia. And we're going to use this short film as a backdrop to teach you some of the fundamentals on filmmaking. In this very first episode, we're going to cover some of the basics and what you need to know if you're transitioning from photography to video. For those of you who are photographers, you already have an amazing head start when it comes to video. So when you transition to video, you'll find that a lot of the basics and fundamentals are exactly the same. The exciting part about video is all the amazing new storytelling opportunities that you will have.
I think it can often be intimidating getting into film or video, especially when you see what goes into it and the amount of people and the amount of equipment. But as long as you follow a few fundamental rules and basic guidelines about telling a story with motion, you'll find you don't need any of that big fancy equipment, or you don't need all those extra people. You just need a camera capable of capturing motion, and that's it.
So let's start with the very basics. Frame rate is expressed in frames per second, also referred to as FPS for short. At 24 frames per second, you would get the cinematic look that you're used to when you're watching movies. It's what gives you that nice motion blur. The way to achieve slow motion is to shoot footage at a faster frame rate like 60 or 120 frames per second, and then you play it back at a standard speed, something like 24 frames per second. A good rule of thumb regarding shutter speed is that when you're filming in real time and not slow motion, to double your frame rate. So for example, if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, set your shutter speed to 50.
Hey there, I'm just setting up our B camera for our shoot today. Some of the standard settings, we're shooting in 24 frames a second with a 180-degree shutter to maintain that cinematic motion blur we're all used to seeing. And we've got a base ISO of 800 on this camera. It's a Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro, but thankfully this camera's got built-in ND filters, which otherwise you would need to put in front of the lens. But luckily with this camera, they're all internal, so that helps us out quite a bit. We're going to be shooting raw, 12-bit color depth, just so that we can get all of the dynamic range and all of the sensor information. And it gives us the ability to change the ISO and change a lot of the settings after the fact in case we run into trouble, whereas if we were to shoot on ProRes, we wouldn't be able to do that. We would be locked in at whatever settings we shot at, and it kind of doesn't give you a lot of flexibility. So for the movie, we're shooting in RAW so that we have that ability to change things after if we need to. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to shoot in lossless because that's about 500 megabits a second and we would run out of cards in no time. So we're going to shoot at a 3:1 compression ratio. With the anamorphic lenses we're using, unfortunately we're not able to use the full 4.6K resolution of this camera. We have to go to a 3K anamorphic mode. And then we have to go to our settings and turn our 2x anamorphic D-squeeze on.
Let's have a look at some camera angles. The term camera angle always refers to the way a shot is composed. Now let's examine some examples on how the angle of the camera is relative to the subject. When you're looking at an eye level angle, this is the most common view, being the real view angle that we're all used to. It shows subjects as we would expect to see them in real life. It is a fairly neutral shot. A high angle shows the subject from above. The camera is angled down towards the subject, and this has the effect of diminishing the subject, making them appear less powerful, less significant, weak, scared, or even submissive. A low angle is used when we want to show subjects from below, giving them the impression of being more powerful or dominant. A bird's eye view is a scene directly from above. This is a completely different and somewhat unnatural point of view, which can be used for dramatic effect or showing different spatial perspective. The opposite of a bird's eye view is the worm's view. This angle is close to the ground, looking up, conveying an unnatural point of view from the ground up. A slanted or Dutch tilt angle is where the camera is purposely tilted to one side so the horizon is on an angle. This creates an interesting dramatic effect, communicating confusion of some kind or that something isn't right. Now let's dive into shot types. An extreme wide shot is often used as an establishing shot. In the extreme wide shot, the subject is barely visible. In a medium wide shot, the subject is visible, but the emphasis is still to place him in his environment. In a wide shot, the subject takes up the full frame. In a mid shot, we show more details of the subject, but we allude still to the full subject. And in a close-up, a certain feature or part of the subject takes up the full frame. With an extreme close-up, we can focus on extreme details of our subject. An over-the-shoulder shot is when we're looking from behind a person to the subject. A point-of-view shot, or POV shot, is basically a shot from the point of view of the subject. Here are some tips that you can remember if you're transitioning from photography to video. With video, moving your camera is very important, but just as important as knowing when to move the camera. Think about composition throughout your shots. What the composition is at the beginning of the video, and then again by the end of the video. And be aware of some common issues people face when they first enter the world of video.
Most cameras will give you the option for auto white balance at the very least. Some will give you options for auto ISO, but those are usually photo cameras as opposed to cinema cameras. But you really want to make sure you stay away from using auto settings, because depending on the types of lighting you're either going into or out of, it will change on camera. With white balance, you can sometimes have competing light sources, and that will typically confuse the camera, and the colors will also shift in the middle of the shot. The effect that it has is it makes the audience more aware of the camera than the story itself, and it removes them from the stories. So you want to make sure you always take color temperature readings, light meter settings, and lock down all of the settings before you start rolling. If you're looking to make the transition from still photography to video or film, there's a camera out there for absolutely everybody at absolutely every price point. The technical differences, while certainly something to consider, should in no way stop you from making that transition. All you need is a little creativity. No camera is going to stop you or help you or make you tell a better story. It's all up to you, not the camera.
Many different types of stories can be told through video, and depending on how you shoot a shot, it can totally change its meaning, mood, and feeling. Understanding some of these filmmaking basics will help you achieve exactly the results you're trying to convey. This wraps up our first episode. Please come back for episode 2, which is going to be all about composition. If you liked the episode, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave us some comments. Have a beautiful day. And another thing you need to know about being a filmmaker is that you might sometimes have to stay up till 5 o'clock in the fucking morning. Have fun. That was it, by the way, we're done. I'm like so bagged.